right, now we're looking at abortion, God's viewpoint, and I'm having a debate with a friend of mine. It's been going on for decades, and he won't let go of a misinterpretation using a mistranslation. The 1977 New American Standard talks about if a woman is injured by a man fighting another man, and she's part of being injured, and the baby is miscarried. It's not miscarriage, it's the baby left her. And he's insisting on that, and therefore it talks about if the baby was miscarried and died, there's only a fine involved. Therefore the baby can't be a real life because of you shall not kill or shall not murder. And so we go around and around and around. The problem is you have to work from one point at a time. A discussion means you make one point and you understand if you're making a point, it's an assumption that I have to agree to get to the next point. And he won't let me do that. He wants to finish his whole story. It might take 30 minutes. How am I going to memorize everything he says? If I took notes, he still wouldn't go by it. He wouldn't let me go point for point for point because he has an inability to provide a strong argument for what he's saying because he doesn't study Scripture. He just listens to sermons. So here we go. Any case, punish the rapist. Don't punish the baby. So don't abort anyway, regardless of whether you think it's a baby or not. There's irrefutable proof from Scripture and from scientific evidence of like just the sonogram of the baby shows it's moving around, has some kind of life of its own. It's not innate matter. So we're not duplicating what happened in the Garden of Eden when Adam received the breath of lives right then and there. First of all, he didn't get the second life, spiritual, today. He got it then because he was in fellowship, and she had a live spirit, then he can have fellowship with God, which is evident in the account in Genesis 1 and 2, Genesis 2. So you can't take one particular passage of Scripture, misinterpret it, and apply it to everything and everybody. That's the worst case of cherry picking. Any case, what we have here is punish the rapist, not the baby. Even if you don't believe it's the unborn child. But the problem is there is some understanding, medically speaking, that the baby or the fetus does feel pain. I call it an unborn child, but don't cause pain to anything unnecessarily. So politically speaking, let me go back to where I was there. Politically, the most appealing cases in which to allow abortion are those involving rape and incest. The victim of rape or incest has the right to resist her attacker, but the unborn child is an innocent non-aggressor and should not be killed because of the crime of his father. Since the woman has the right to resist the rapist, she also has the right to resist his sperm. Non-abortive measures can be taken, consistent with the law and even Catholic teaching, promptly after the rape, which are not intended to abort and which may prevent conception. I'm not Catholic, I'm just going to different points of view here. Even within the Catholic rules and regulations, which not all is scriptural, they don't have the gospel right, it still allows for their teaching to be intact, promptly after the rape, which are not intended to abort and which may prevent conception. However, the innocent third party is conceived and he should not be killed. So, what we have here, when questioned in Arizona about whether he would favor an exception to follow abortion, this is Pat Buchanan, for a woman who had been raped, presidential candidate Pat Buchanan revoiced his firm conviction that abortion should be totally prohibited. I don't care about the circumstances of the child's conception. You want to execute somebody in the case of rape, execute the rapist and let the unborn child live. Now that's what he said. Buchanan said later that he did not endorse the death penalty for rapists. So, some presidential candidate. But he held firmly to his no exception position on legal protection for the unborn. Supporters of abortion attack the no exception position is heartless and insensitive to the needs of the mother. And many abortion opponents concede that abortion ought to be allowed in hard cases to see if it really makes sense to forbid abortion in every situation. Well, 11, compromise. The incremental approach leads to license to kill. Since 1981, major elements of the pro-life movement have promoted incremental legislation that would allow abortion when the life of the mother is in danger in pregnancies caused by rape or incest, and for minors who obtain parental consent. Such incremental legislation strategy, however, affirms the basic holding of Roe v. Wade that the unborn child is not a person and therefore has no constitutionally guaranteed rights. It is fair to suggest that these compromise approaches have served to increase the toll of lives. And get that toll of lives. Spell check. Oops. Lives. From abortion. For example, the enactment of a law requiring an unmarried minor to obtain parental consent before an abortion will predictably decrease the number of abortions from those under the previously unrestricted law. The proper comparison, however, would be between a situation in which the law was either wholly permissive or required parental consent on the one hand, and on the other, a situation in which the pro-life movement and the churches were insisting that the murder of the innocent can never be rightly allowed. The dominant abortions of the near future will be committed by pills, implants, and other devices. The only effective way that the law can reach such early abortions will be by licensing and prescription restrictions and similar regulations. But the only way to mobilize sufficient support for such restrictions will be to restore the public conviction that all life is sacred and must be protected by the law. The incremental strategy, which seeks to regulate rather than prohibit abortion, undermines that conviction because it permeates the public discourse with the message that even pro-life advocates agree that innocent life is negotiable. Consider one example. Station KELO-TV in Sioux Falls, South Dakota conducted 2 polls on abortion, one in late 1900 and one in late 1991. The major pro-life news event in 1991 in South Dakota was an attempt to outlaw abortions except those for rape, incest, and the life or physical health of the mother. After that campaign, the second poll, which was identical to the first and covered the same audience, showed that more people favored some abortions and fewer opposed all abortions than had been the case with the first poll. As Paul Ardor of the organization Rescuing the Perishing explained, the large body of the public who remain unsure where they stand on abortion took to committed pro-life and pro-death forces to help develop their views, and with many pro-lifers willing to allow some abortions legislatively, it appears that the public has followed their lead. As a result, we have lost ground with the public. This is 30 years ago. The 1992 election confirms that a pro-life strategy of compromise contributes to the institutionalization of the abortion ethic. The Washington Post ABC News poll taken in January 1993 reported the percent of people who believe abortion should be legal and compared the results to those before the election. In the presidential campaign, Bill Clinton took the totally pro-abortion position. The pro-life candidate, President Bush, backed by much of the pro-life movement, supported legalized abortion in cases involving the life of the mother, rape, and incest. The result, public attitudes shifted markedly in a pro-abortion direction in all categories. The post-election support for abortion was the highest in the history of that poll, and why not? When the pro-life people claim that the right to life is inalienable and then support its alienation, why should people take seriously pro-life rhetoric about the absolute sanctity of innocent life? Life is sacred. Let's underline that. While the effort to ban the partial abortion, PBA, will fail because of the president's veto, it has exposed the barbarity of the abortion culture. The moral gravity of procured abortion is apparent in all its truth, said Pope John Paul. If we recognize that we are dealing with murder, in any civilized society, the issue must be whether innocent human beings may be illegally murdered. Over the past 2 decades, however, the pro-life movements has sought to limit, but not wholly prohibit, their abortion. All right. Thus framing the issue as which innocents may be killed. The PBA campaign is a further retreat, focusing on the issue of how innocents may be legally killed. If the campaign against the PBA is interpreted by the public as opposition only to the method of the killing, that campaign will ironically reinforce the abortion culture. The murder of an innocent child by jamming scissors into his brain is qualitatively no different from murder by any other method, including morning after pills and other abortifactions. The gruesome reality of the PBA reflects the intrinsic evil of any and all forms of abortion. The campaign to prohibit partial birth abortions must not distract us from the reality that the law can never validly tolerate the execution of the innocent, no matter how that killing is done. The issue is whether, not which or how, innocent children should be legally killed. The only chance for the restoration of the right to life in our law is for pro-life people to insist that life is sacred because it comes from God, not from the state, and that the state can never validly tolerate the intentional killing of innocent human beings. That'll have to wait to the end of the millennium, to the beginning of the millennium, the end of this age, because we find we're going in the opposite direction towards believing in God even. It is long past time for us to stop debating refinements of pro-death proposals. Rather, we must shift the debate to our own agenda. The pro-life movement must insist on protection of life without exception from the beginning. So we have the Supreme Court has abused its authority over the people, Congress, and the Constitution. Take a look at this. In the matter of the Supreme Court's decision, Roe v. Wade, Justice Byron White of that particular Supreme Court presented his dissent from the other justices' ruling. I find nothing in the language or history of the Constitution to support the Court's judgment. The Court simply fashions and announces a new constitutional right for pregnant mothers, and with scarcely any reason or authority for its action, invests that right with sufficient substance to override most existing state abortion statutes. It teaches an order of priorities in which the state exalts convenience over the right to life of an unborn human being, including babies who are slaughtered in the birth canal a few inches and seconds shy of birth. That ethic did not develop through spontaneous consensus. It was imposed upon the American public by a lawless Supreme Court. So the House Judiciary Committee has observed there is no substantive difference between a child in the process of being born and that same child when he or she is born. The only distinguishing characteristics is locale. Clearly the child is as much a person when it is in the process of being born as that child is when the process is complete. New American. License to kill. God has the final say on the matter as it is taught in Scripture and reflected in America's Declaration of Independence, in which the right to life is conferred upon individuals by their Creator, the God of the Bible, which goes farther, before conception. But Congress should resolve the abuse. Okay, Congress can do that. Has it? No. John Sobran states in the New American, January 1998, in the Supreme Court, is the Supreme Court really so powerful? No, it has the power only by the sufferance of Congress, which can control it anytime it chooses. This is why the court has been so careful, especially since the New Deal, not to cross Congress by striking down its even most flagrantly unconstitutional laws. Oops. If it had truly objected to Roe on either moral or constitutional grounds, Congress could have impeached the justices who had voted to oppose legal abortion on the nation. It could have taken the lesser measures of cutting the budget and staff of the court as a whole. Even now, Congress has the power under Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution to limit the court's appellate jurisdiction. By simple majority vote of both houses, it could remove the court's appellate jurisdiction over abortion cases. Of course, President Clinton would veto any such act, but Congress could override his veto. So nobody did anything. All that is lacking is the will, and it has been lacking since 1973. Now we're in 2020. Even during the tenure of presidents who opposed Roe, the truth is that more congressmen have no objection, most congressmen have no objection to anything the court does as long as it leaves Congress free to go on usurping powers never delegated to it. All three branches of the federal government, unfortunately, are in the same business. Moreover, even well-meaning congressmen are hardly aware of the powers they hardly have. Few members of Congress have studied the Constitution they are sworn to uphold. More on this next time.